But I still say, always, it's hard, but it's worth it. I think that the reward of being trusted to be in somebody's world like that is so gratifying.
Welcome to Intrinsically Motivated, where we're having conversations with experts in the field of addiction, recovery, and those who've been affected by it as we seek to mobilize the church to replace addiction and mental health challenges with flourishing. I'm Tanner Clements, and I'm the Media and Training Director for Uplift Appalachia. So what is Uplift Appalachia, and how did we get here? Episode 1 of Intrinsically Motivated is a conversation with Uplift President Dr. Andi Clements. She's a professor of psychology at East Tennessee State University and associate director of the ETSU Ballad Health Strong Brain Institute. We'll talk about why Uplift Appalachia exists and how we came to be in the first place. Where do we start with how we got into this?
We stepped backwards into it.
We felt like we were supposed to start a church. I fully believe we were supposed to start a church. We started a church.
We did.
We planted a church with a couple other families. And then for 8.5 years, we did really intense ministry in a really low-income area of downtown Johnson City, Tennessee. And we got to see lots of people and build lots of relationships and go through lots of struggles together and stuff like that. What kind of stuff, I think, when you think back, because that was for 8.5 years. Then post-pandemic, that part of our lives, that ministry ended. Right. But what were some of the things that you think along the way? Are there any steps or points in there that really jumped out?
One of the things I see is for so long, God was building us, getting us ready to go there, because there was like this sort of pull to this particular neighborhood. Off and on, we saw glimmers. And then by the time we tried hard not to plant a church. It's like, ooh, pick somebody else, do something else. We can do it a different way. And it was like, we had to. But it was that particular neighborhood and trying to reach that neighborhood. And we didn't even know what reach that neighborhood meant. We just moved in and sort of day by day saw it happen. But then we did. And that was it. It was like people came and their lives were changed. But our lives were changed, I think, just as much as their lives were changed. And I mean, look where we are now.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of what I think you said, the most important thing, we moved in. It wasn't like we would come in and set up a church for a week and then leave, or we would come in and like we really tried to be a part of that area. We would walk the streets praying and hopefully talking to people and just hoping to get to know people. We'd just open the doors and let whoever wanted to come in. And I don't think, I know I didn't when we first started. I didn't think we're starting a church and we're going to really get heavily involved in addiction ministry. You might have already thought that because you knew that it was after.
It was after we started the church.
It's not surprising that we ended up doing addiction ministry.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't think any of us were intentionally thinking, we're going to go start an addiction ministry-based church. It wasn't ever an addiction ministry-based church, but a large portion of what we were doing was that. Definitely that.
And I think I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, too, that so much of what we have done, that it's interesting that we're sitting around a table talking, because so much of what we have learned and done has been around a table. And that was one of the things as we planted the church. I remember I was talking about this morning with someone. Our non-negotiable practical thing was that we would always have lunch and eat with people, because we thought that around the table was so important. And all along the way, we can count back to the number of conversations we've had around tables.
Yeah, we were there for 8.5 years. And I think less than 10 weeks did we not have some sort of potluck after our Sunday morning service every week. And so we really did. It's like you talk to people before and after church, but to sit there and eat lunch with them, and then to probably go grab lunch or dinner with somebody later that night, or like we really were just around each other a lot. And I think that taught us a lot of what became the heart behind Uplift.
Absolutely.
Because like you said, we weren't going in to start an addiction ministry, I don't think.
No, it was a couple of years. Well, it was probably half a year in when I first started working with a population, a high risk, high need felony offender program. I started volunteering because we had planted a church. We were in the area. And it was a grant-funded program, and I just started working there, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a thing. If we can ever make a dent it's going to change a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think it was coming to us anyways. Like our doors were open. People were coming in that were struggling that way.
Right.
And so we were absolutely going to have to learn how to serve in this way. And we were going to learn, and we tried lots of things. We learned what did work and what didn't work. Like just having open doors and letting people walk in didn't necessarily accomplish a lot. But like you said, non-negotiable, sitting around having a meal with people, that was having a real impact on things. And so
things we teach now, we didn't learn from books. We learned from the people living them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that really is just getting to know people over a meal. Equals.
Right. Just spending time being in people's lives and feeling the things that they feel sometimes too. Because I think that was the other thing. You think, oh, I'm going to go play in a church. It's going to be awesome. We're going to play whatever songs we want to play. We're going to preach on whatever things we want to preach on. And that all happens, and that's nice and that's fun, but that's not the purpose. But then at the same time, you don't think, and also everybody that I interact with is going to be sad at some point, and I'm going to feel all of their sadness with them. And you really get to experience that, especially with the people that would come in. It was just how open people were about the things that they were dealing with that we learned, and people were ready to connect with each other. So you started getting involved in a program.
Right.
And then you start to see that as a bigger problem and an area that you could study.
Right. The beauty of being a psychology professor or a professor of any kind is you have to do research, but you can tailor that to things that interest you. And so that gave me a lot of resources and opportunity to sort of tailor what I was doing at work also to that. And the more I studied it, and also teach a class, I teach a seminar on addiction. And so just the ability to study it individually on the street, but also scientifically, and also happen to have a theologian sitting here with me. And so it's like pooling all of our resources to look at this in a really thorough, rich way from all kinds of angles, I think is a beauty of what we have become too, is that intersection.
Science theology,
yeah.
Practical application,
absolutely.
But also just like willingness, like how do you say it? I mean, we say intrinsic motivation a lot, but I'm trying I'm trying to think of a different way to say it. And like it's a God-given natural willingness to do whatever it takes kind of thing.
Right.
That we want people
a
to
drive, a compulsion, how could we not?
Right. And
how could we not?
I think the more we got to actually know people while we were at the church was what did that. Because it's not, there's a problem, there are people, if I do this, maybe fewer people will be addicted. It was, this is that person that I've now spent large portions of my life with that I see struggling in very specific ways that hurt me.
Yes.
To see them hurt the way that they're hurting.
Yes.
And once we had that kind of connection, I think we started to see those little glimpses of, hey, maybe there's something to being in people's lives in this way, and not just throwing a plan at them and telling them, try this, you're on your own though.
Right. Or dropping them off at a resource.
Right. But at the same time, there were people getting dropped off at the resource that you were working in, but that resource was building people in connection with people. Like there were people that were there to build relationships with people. And that was part of what helped, I think, make that as effective as it was.
Right.
So along that way, you realize the church might be the answer, right? And I've heard you say this part before, so I'm going to let you say it. But like the church might be the answer. So what did you pray as you were thinking that?
Well, so I was thinking, there are so many of us that what if we could mobilize the church to be the workforce to address addiction?
And so then right after that, somebody came to you and said what?
Well, invited to lunch by someone I had sort of met, didn't know exactly who he was. A friend of mine and I went to lunch with him, and he said, so I've been thinking we should try to mobilize the church to address addiction. And I just looked up and said, yes, Lord.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Right, and that led to the first Holy Friendship Summit.
Yes.
Which was a gathering of churches coming together asking, what is this and what is our role in it?
Right.
And we brought in people to kind of talk about...
It was clinicians, physicians, psychiatrists. It was addiction medicine folks. It was theologians. It was church members. It was psychologists. It was kind of everybody, like 450 people, everybody together for a couple of days to just really study the ins and outs and of the whole issue.
Like just kind of begin to scratch the surface on what it could look like if the church was going to do something like this. I will just shout out that our church was, I think, the best attended church that was there. And I think it was
half of our attendance.
I think it was like most, we were never a big church. I mean, we were very small, but yeah, so I think those couple of days just really gave us an opportunity to kind of sit in that space and just ponder a lot.
Right.
What could that look like? And the Holy Friendship Summit led to the Holy Friendship Collaborative.
Absolutely, yes.
Which was kind of the first attempt at what Uplift kind of became out of that.
Right.
It was really just trying to bring churches together, study addiction, and then try to find practical ways to do that. But at the same time, we were still at our church plant. We were still, which I don't know if we said the name, is Christ Reconciled Church. I keep almost saying CRC, and it's like, we didn't say that, so I'm going to say
now we can say CRC because you have
now
said
I can say CRC because it was Christ Reconciled Church, but CRC was already kind of down the rabbit hole, not because we thought we were so far ahead of everybody, but just because we were right there, and it was right there on our doorstep.
It was happening whether we knew how to do it or not.
Whether we were ready or not. So we were already starting to learn so much. So I'm not saying that the Holy Friendship Collaborative wasn't helpful. It was absolutely an important part of keeping us focused on better understanding and better collaborating, because it was always very hard to collaborate as small a church as we were with other churches and see what else was going on. And,
because we were so busy doing the thing.
Because we were so busy. But I think that was also one of the, not downfalls, but like one of the biggest struggles at CRC was that we were so small. We didn't realize the level of intensity that it took for even one person to be ministered to in a way that was going to make a dent.
Right.
And I think that was kind of what ultimately led to us feeling like the ministry at CRC was kind of coming to an end so that we could take the things that we've learned into places that were maybe more equipped to maybe start picking up on some of that and kind of go forward with that. But before we get to all of that, because that's even closer to present day.
Yes.
So you had the Holy Friendship Collaborative happening all at the same time. CRC is kind of at the same time learning things along the way. Then, again, coming back to sitting down and having conversations over meals, you and I had lunch. We both work at East Tennessee State University, and it was one of those days where it's like, let's go have lunch in the cafeteria. Yep. And we sit down and we're just kind of talking about whatever. Then
the Holy Spirit infused your brain with an idea.
No, but this was kind of what became Uplift.
Yes.
Because we were having this conversation about what is it going to look like? What can it look like going forward? What's the most effective way for church to do it? And I'm sure we were talking about all sorts of other things too. But all of a sudden, I had this realization, half of our church is giving rides to the other half of our church. Again, small church.
Right.
So if you imagine 30 people coming on a Sunday morning, 15 people giving 15 other people rides was happening. But it wasn't just they're giving each other rides. It was that we were seeing people's lives being changed because of the very short amount of time, but very intense time of connection that they were having on a weekly basis.
Right. They were developing relationships, and that was never the intent. It was to get them to church. But then it was like, oh, wow, they actually became friends.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to use some examples without using names, but it's like it was two guys that were just have nothing to do with any other set of circumstances. These two people wouldn't, if they crossed paths, they would immediately have gone other directions. Like they were just very different people.
Nothing in common.
One very quiet, one very not quiet, that sort of thing. And it's like, it just so happened, that it was convenient that they lived near enough to one another that one guy could pick up the other guy on the way to church.
And it was the very quiet, reserved one that did the picking up. So it's like on purpose doing this thing.
I'm going to go reach out to this person, know. And over time, not only did they get to know each other and they were friendly, but like the quiet, reserved guy was challenging the outgoing wild guy. I mean, I can't think of a better way to describe. Just out there.
The loose cannon.
Right. He was challenging him, no, you got to do this. He was pushing him on things. And it was like they had an actual connection built on like a mutual trust in one another.
Right.
Like they could take the push from each other because they trusted that each other cared for each other.
Right.
And it's like when we had this realization, it's like, wait a second, this is a very easy thing to implement anywhere.
Right. And you look back and I think we should say the rider also struggles with mental illness and addiction, and he got better.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like he
was getting better. Yeah. There was so much that was changing in his life. I mean, he was one of the most consistent church attenders we had at that point. Absolutely. And if he didn't have somebody giving him a ride, not only would he not be in church, but I don't think he would have, who knows what his life would have been looking like at that point. And so it was just very encouraging to see that happening so naturally.
Yes.
And that was the thing that we realized is it's a really natural next step for us to realize, oh, just giving somebody a ride is a thing, but not just giving somebody a ride and never talking to them.
Right.
You know,
Right. Not like Uber, not like a taxi.
Right. And that's one of the things that we talk about. And I'm sure as we get to do more trainings and things like that, one of the things that I would really like to spend more time exploring or discussing is the difference between sitting in the front seat versus sitting in the back seat.
Yep.
You know, like when you get in a taxi, you hop in the back seat, they say where you want to go, you say there, and then you check out, and then you get out of the car, and that's it.
You may have a conversation, but you don't expect to see them again.
But when you get in a car with a friend, you don't sit in the back seat.
No.
You sit in the front seat.
Shoulder to
and
shoulder.
You talk about things along the way, and you judge each other's driving, and you pull off and you go through the drive-thru if you're me at McDonald's and you get 17 Diet Coke. You know, like you go through, you experience your life together at that point. Right. And that leads to so much more meaningful connection with people, which, I mean, we know is to a degree helpful with helping people come out of addiction and seeing people's lives change. That's not really what we're trying to get at all. We're not trying to unpack all of that.
Right. I do want to stick in one quick thing since the church has closed.
Yeah.
And people might say, what happened to the guy? We still give him a ride to church with us now where we go on Sundays. So he's good.
He's not lost.
He's not lost.
He did not get lost.
No.
And but I will say that was that the church closed mid-COVID. I mean, lots of things happened during that time. Right. So, I mean, there were lots of reasons. I think the biggest reason was God used that time to say, all right, time to do something different.
Fan out, mobilize.
Which that was the cool thing was a lot of us went to a lot of different places, and we all went with people that we had built connections with. And that kind of connection continued on. Right. So that was kind of cool. So we had that conversation over lunch. This could be a thing, giving people rides, kind of like Uber or Lyft. And then my dad said, what if you called it Uplift? And so obviously that stuck. Right. But it was just, so it all developed, all of this kind of began to develop from the idea of what if we developed a transportation ministry? And I think we quickly realized that not everybody is A, ready to do a transportation ministry, and B, even if they are, maybe it's a big church that has lots of people that could give people rides. If you're not ready,
equipped.
If you're not equipped for the type of relationship, you're not going to be ready either.
Right. It's not staffing the nursery. It's not just let's get some people to sign up and do it. Yeah, you'll get them from here to there, but it's not the same. And we believe there's that quality of the driver that has to be pursuing people.
Right. So we're having all this conversation. At the same time, were you executive director?
Of Holy Friendship Collaborative, which we haven't said much about, but it was a nonprofit established to further this mission to mobilize churches to address addiction. And so we felt, as we developed Uplift, that we were a church being mobilized. And so it was like, we assumed it would be many churches that got mobilized during this effort, that our niche was going to be this.
We're gonna help develop transportation ministry, and we're gonna take it all over the place. Yep. And as churches are ready, because of the work that HFC, Holy Friendship Collaborative, was doing, right? As HFC's working, different people are going to come up with different applications. This one's going to be ours, right? And we'd always thought about maybe there's a housing version of this too, or a jobs version too. And I think those things are still absolutely
we know the needs,
valuable. Yeah. Like those are the things that people need: housing, transportation,
and a job.
Yep. And that, and I think that we were thinking more of that was going to happen. And HFC was still working in that direction. Ultimately, what all went on with HFC? Because I was tertiarily involved, but more on the church side and the Uplift side.
So it was developed. We had the summit and a large steering committee that created the Holy Friendship Summit. And then we were done. And it was like, well, what do we do now? We still want to do this, but we didn't have a product we were working toward at that time. And somebody said, oh, there's this federal grant that sounds exactly like what we're doing. Well, long story short, wrote a grant, got it. It was supposed to be a 1-year grant. We ended up getting 2 years to spend the money over. And so we established the Holy Friendship Collaborative as a nonprofit, and the goal was to equip churches to be mobilized to address addiction. And so we were partnering with Duke all through that, and worked on materials with some folks from the Theology, Medicine, Culture initiative at Duke. And we still collaborate with them.
And so that work was going on. Ultimately, HFC kind of
dissolved and let us take over. We thought we were going to be the practical part. Uplift was going to be the practical part. HFC was going to be the equipping part. And just administratively, it ended up not making sense. And so there was this mutual agreement that they would just bequeath to us also the equipping part. So we sort of absorbed them for
Well, I
lack
think a
of
lot of that is because we were realizing, going back to what we were saying about, it's like you can develop a ministry, you can ask people to volunteer for it, but if people aren't equipped and ready to minister specifically with this as an addiction ministry in mind, or, really trying to build intense community with people, it could happen, but it's not necessarily going to be as effective in the long run as it could be. And so it's like you had to start with that, I always say, that workforce development part at the beginning. And if you don't start with the workforce development part, if people aren't equipped in the right way, it is what it is. Like, not to say it can't work, but to say everything that we've seen in our 8.5 years at CRC and working with HFC and still continuing to work through Uplift is like, it's most effective when people are completely bought in and completely equipped and ready and know what they're getting themselves into, know the challenges, know the...
Right.
So speaking of the challenges, you have 8.5 years of CRC experience, and somewhere along the line, HFC jumped in there. And so we've been going, it's been a long time.
Right.
We've been going for a long time.
Been a while.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you've experienced when you've been trying to, because I know you're driven to make an impact, but it's hard, but it's worth it. We say that before. What have been have there been any like really standout hard parts of that?
So do you mean like in the actual ministering to a person, or do you mean in the trying to equip churches?
You can answer that either way or both ways.
Okay, let me start. Okay. So I prayed to mobilize the church to address addiction. And so I thought, there's all this information. I can just, as long as I make the need known, people will say, where do I sign up? Let's get started. What do I need? That has not happened. Occasionally it does. I did a training this morning. It was fantastic because the church was ready. It's my own church. It took 1.5 years to get there, and so now today I have done this. But yeah, and I don't fault anyone for that. It's a big bite to bite off. It is. So I think that is you have to so work the soil before you even get a hearing, before you even get to tell people how great it is, before you even get to start equipping. So that I've had to become a much more patient person with. Some days I'm patient, some days I'm not, usually. But then I think the on a personal level, just the investment of your time, your energy, your tears, your cash, whatever it is an intensive thing. I think we have gotten better at it. I think at first I took too much of it on myself. It's like, I need to do this thing. And it was like, God never said I have. It's like trying to save somebody. If you think it's up to you if somebody's gonna get saved, that's one thing. But it's like, no, I plant the seeds and I follow your leading, but it's up to you to do that. And I think backing up to the point where it's like, I cannot unaddict someone. I cannot keep them out of jail. None of that. I can do what my piece is at that moment has been extremely helpful. But I still say, always, it's hard, but it's worth it. I think the reward of, I guess, being trusted to be in somebody's world like that is so gratifying. And I know it sounds hard. You're sitting in the emergency room with somebody detoxing. It's like, you get into that. It's like, it's not the fact that is fun for me. It is not fun for them, but it's like an honor to be able to walk with somebody through really hard stuff, and afterwards you're so much closer to that person, and I don't know. It's hard to explain.
But you're also very tired.
But you're very tired. You're very tired, and you do have to tap out occasionally, and that's one of the things I really learned.
Yeah, I think
it takes multiple people.
Well, I think that was also one of the struggles that we ran into while we were still at CRC. Was like we were trying to both develop this nonprofit thing and keep the CRC thing going as well as we could. And it was impossible. It was impossible to do both. And that's probably why it's best that one thing had to go. And it's like, we kept this nonprofit out of the church. No, we didn't get rid of the church. The church just went to other churches and is ready to keep being the church in those places. Right. But yeah, I think we just realized.
Ooh, think of it as sourdough bread starter.
Okay.
We've all just gone to make more starter.
We've just spread out. We're getting, okay, I see where you're going.
We're in everybody's...
At first I was sitting there thinking, we smell bad and we have lots of yeast.
Right. We're in everybody's fridge just all over town now.
Yeah, and everybody's like, why did you give me this? Now I have to keep it alive. That's how they all feel when we first show up.
That's right.
No.
That's right.
So you kind of alluded to the honor part, but have there been any really specific rewarding moments along the way as we've been kind of building this thing out that you feel like this feels good? Or
Yeah, well,
not because it's not about us. We know that it's not about us.
No.
But points where it's like, wow.
It's like inspirational stories. I am so much a data person, and I can give you some statistics that show this, that, and the other, and people yawn and go away. But we have storylines woven through our last several years, and one of them, obviously, is a fellow that I met through the DRC, which I mentioned, in and out of jail since he was 19. He's now 45. And you think, this is, how is this ever going to work? He got out in 2017. That's when I met him for a couple of months, came to church, disappeared, relapsed, went back to jail. And some miraculous stories there. I won't go into those right now. And then kept in touch that entire year he was in jail, got out again the next spring, 2018. Ended up going to the DRC. Our church helped him find a place to live and furnished his apartment and took him to church and all that. And it was going so well, and relapsed and got lost for a while, ended up going back to jail. And you think, wow, that doesn't sound very good. Well, now he and the people from the church tried to get him in treatment, got a lawyer to try to get him to be released to treatment, and had a hearing, and basically the judge said, you're a bad person and you need to run your time. And we were pretty devastated, because it's almost like, wow, this is something we absolutely don't control. How can this be what God wants? Look at all we put into it. But one of the things I just have to say really quickly, because he was there, we were all, we packed our pew in court. There were a couple of rows of us there.
That same percentage of the church that made it to the summit was
half
also...
the church went to court.
Half the church went to court.
But he was not so surprised by them. He knew that judge. He'd been there so many times. But he called me from booking when they took him back. And the first words out of his mouth were, are you still in it for the long haul? And because I kept telling him, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm in it for the long haul. I was like, yeah, I am. Yeah, I am. This is not what I thought it would look like, but yeah, we're still here. We're still here. But to just add a little icing, this past spring, he got paroled. He was back in for 3.5 years?
Long time.
But he's on parole, and he is living in a different county.
Thank God.
He has a place to live. He has a full-time job. He got his driver's license. He has a truck. The woman that lets him, he actually lives in a camper on someone's farm, and she sort of mothers him. She's in her 70s, and he volunteers at a place, but then he works all week. And so far, so good. Yeah. And it's like, who would have ever, 5 years ago, who would have ever thought?
Just to kind of add a little context, because obviously I was around for
lots of
all of that.
Lots of that.
Two cool things that I'll add to that story that I just think kind of demonstrate what we hope Uplift is going to be able to see happen in different churches is the last time he relapsed and was going to go back in, that day before he went to turn himself in, he specifically said, I know I've never joined this church, but I would like to join the church so that I can take communion with you guys and know that I'm a part of your church while I go in. Mm-hmm. And so that day he joined the church, he took communion with us. And then was that the day we all went? That was
he had been in the hospital, and that day, more than half the church
showed up
when he turned himself back in.
He was turning himself back in. We all showed up outside the jail,
hugged him.
Everybody hugged him. We took a group picture, and then he was
and
like,
the guards thought we had three heads. They said, "What is going on?
Why are you all hugging this guy?" We hugged him. He went in, and then while he was still close, before he got transferred around a bunch of different places, but for the better part of a year and a half or something of the next period, somebody from the church was going to visit him
every week.
Yep. And I think that was just a picture of the in it for the long haul.
Yep.
And how it wasn't one person that was in it for the long haul.
Right.
Because if one person had been in it for the long haul, you would have been dead by now.
I would have flamed out.
It would have been over. And I think that's why it's super intense, but it also takes a lot more than just one. Like one person can't give you that kind of community. It takes So when we talked about non-negotiable, sitting down and having a meal together, it's a lot of us sitting down and having a meal together.
Right.
And we're also only going to have food if everybody brings something for the potluck this week.
Right. Right.
Like we're all in it together.
Yeah.
And I think that in his life specifically, seeing people texting, hey, are you going to be able to go visit him this week? I was hoping to go visit him. So if you're not, I'll go. Like
Right.
people planning their lives on the weekends around visitation hours at the
Right.
local jail.
Right.
So that we can go visit our friend who's in there because he's relapsed
Right.
so many times and spent over half his life in
In
jail.
jail. Right.
And seeing that play out, as it was playing out,
Right.
seeing the church continue to be there for him was really very, very encouraging.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that the more we've seen it play out, and I think he's probably kind of our key example as to what we think it can look like. And again,
Right.
even when it works at its best, it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Didn't mean he
2
didn't
steps
relapse
forward,
3
1
times.
step. It didn't mean that he was instantly cured. And
Right.
it
Right.
really has, it's taken, how long have we known him now?
5 years?
So,
Five, yeah,
I was
5
gonna
and a
say
half. Yeah.
a long time. We've
Yeah.
known him.
Yeah.
We've known him for half a decade.
There you go.
Let's say
There you
make
go.
it that way. It sounds way more intense, but we've known him for half a decade, and it's still been hard, and
Right.
it's still been slow, and it's been a grind.
And I think some people would say, but that's only one person. Look at these other millions of people. But have you ever heard the thing with the starfish? The little boys walking down the beach and all the starfish are on the beach.
I probably. but
Okay,
you
I'll
go
tell
ahead.
You. I'll tell you again. Okay, so all these starfish, and they're going to die if you don't get them back in the water. So he's throwing back a starfish, and he's throwing back a starfish. And this little man comes along, and he said, I don't even know why you bother. It's not going to make a difference. And he just said, made a difference to that one.
To that
you
one,
know,
yeah.
and
I have
so
heard
it's
that,
like,
yeah.
So like each person, no, we can't take, like our church we had a few people, we've mentioned a couple of them that we really wrapped around, but a small church can't do that much, but you can intensely. It's like you can know a bunch of people very peripherally and maybe make no difference or make things worse, or a couple that you really do intensely care for. And it does move their needle.
And I was going to say, and it sounds like you're not making a huge global impact, but you are. You are, because it's a huge impact for that, right? Like you said, for that person.
And we're
But
telling a whole bunch of people about
we're
it now
telling a
that
whole
can
bunch-
do the
yeah.
same thing.
You can do the same thing that we did. And I think that's the thing. It's like
Yeah.
when you realize how many churches are there in Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia, you probably
in
know them.
the 21 counties from that grant, 21 counties, 2,300 faith groups.
2,300 faith groups. So
Yes.
just speculation. How many? What's the population of this area?
Gosh, I don't even know.
I don't know if we know, but
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say, if you look at if 2,300 churches took on one person, that's
So many.
That's
Yeah.
what, 5% of the population of Johnson City, or something,
Yeah.
that's that big of an impact
Yeah.
when you think of it that way. And I think that's the whole point. Is like we're not necessarily saying every single church is going to make these earth-shattering things, but when the church altogether
Right.
kind of comes through
Right.
and does that, and that's why I think we're so excited about the workforce development part.
Right.
Like-
and one of the things, and what I'm talking about, and I think I scare people when it's like, I drive around and find people and I go to the ER, blah, blah, blah. But it could just be like, I'm going to take this mom, I'm going to watch her child and take her to her probation appointment every week. And that's it. And I'm just going to watch the child while she's in probation. One thing, a trip back and forth, and that is it. You get to be friends still, but you're not following them around the universe. So it's like there are lots of levels that it doesn't have to mean that you are.
Or you're watching the kids while somebody else goes and gives somebody rides.
Maybe.
You're enabling somebody else to go and take part in
Right,
some
right.
like that's why we say it's like we have really specific ideas for transportation because that was one of the things that we saw work out, and we think that's a really easy entry point for a lot of churches that are probably ready.
Right.
That
Well, and
they could-
because the
they could-
people are so desperate for that, you've
And-
almost got a captive audience because they've
that's-
got to have a ride.
Well, and I was going to say, and that's like the number one thing.
The number one thing, yeah.
The number one thing. Then housing, but transportation even more than housing. I would
Right,
even
right.
say, because
Probably. It just depends on, but yeah.
it depends
both
on the
of them
area
are-
you live in.
yeah.
But I think the thing is like there are shelters, there are ministries, there are things that specifically make housing available, but they still have to get there.
Right, particularly in rural areas, like where a lot of the area surrounding us is very rural, and you can't just walk, you can't get the bus, there is no train. It's like
Well, and
you
most
don't
of, and
have
I would
a choice.
say most of the most of the homeless population programs that are taking place in our area are happening in downtown Johnson City.
Right.
Like a lot of the programs are there. The jail and the courthouse are in
The county.
Jonesboro.
Right.
They're in the county, which is a 15-minute drive.
Right. Right.
So, and that, I mean, again, going back to what we saw is just being able to make your court appointments is a huge hurdle
Yeah.
that people can get over to get them out of the cycle that they're caught in.
Right.
More people are reoffending because
They didn't show up to court.
so why not?
Yeah.
Why not just keep living the life I'm living? I can't get out anyway, you know?
No.
And so I think that's why we see it as such an easy entry point for where
Right.
people can kind of get in, which is what kind of led to our original conversation about it. And so that's why I think it's important to do that workforce development part so that people not just are giving people places. You're not just getting somebody from A to B. You're actually
Getting sharing life
with them and that sort of thing. So looking forward, because at this point we keep saying we're ready to do the thing, or what is that? What is it? So, I mean, you know my vision. I love the workforce development part of it. I love the equipping people part of it.
Right.
I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not very good with having conversations with people that I don't know. I'm not like one-on-one, you know, like I'm not. So I think I'm saying that because you've been really good at getting to know individual people and minister to people in really specific
Right.
ways, whereas I haven't been that. And I'm saying that so that as somebody's listening to this, they might think, oh, I'm not good at talking. I still found myself in plenty of those situations, and I still got
Right.
a whole lot better at it. So there's still hope for all of us. But at the same time, there are so many ways that can be applied
Right.
that everybody can kind of find their entry point. But looking forward, what are the kind of the things that you are most excited about seeing Uplift hopefully get to do in the upcoming months, in the upcoming years, whatever?
I think one of the things that we found, because we thought, like I said at the beginning, we're just going to waltz in and say, hey, let's go do this thing and we'll help you get started. And that didn't really happen.
I'm here. What are your other 2 wishes?
But it was this kind of, there's a disconnect between the faith community and the treatment community. It's like you've got one voice over here saying this is the only way to treat addiction and you have to do it this way, and not even considering the faith piece of it. And then you've got the faith community kind of saying, I don't trust those clinicians and those scientists. We're going to just pray harder and it'll happen sort of thing. And not all churches, but some. So we've spent the last couple of years really working on this, how to become sort of the liaison between those communities. So we've done some articles and presentations and things like that. So that's one piece that is laid groundwork. Another is we have developed trainings. We keep saying we want to equip. Well, what do you want to equip with? Well, we've got to have the trainings. One of the things that we think is just centrally pivotal as looking at how did people even get there? Because generally, addiction itself, it becomes a problem, but it's not. It's a symptom of a problem. It is people's best way to cope with something. And a lot of times that's early adversity. It could be, growing up unsupervised, whatever. There are lots of things. And we do a lot of talking about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, if you've heard of that. Where we know that brains are actually changed by early adversity, and it just changes how people learn and respond and all of those kinds of things. So training in that, training in what is addiction? How does it work? Because if you have been in a family with addiction, you may understand it, but if you haven't, why would you even know? So kind of like, this is what you're getting into, and then sort of, what are treatment options? I want to help somebody. Well, there's if I look it up on the internet, you're going to get kind of one answer, and it doesn't include anything faith related whatsoever. And so kind of here are all of the pros and cons of all of it, and how to weigh that out and talk through that with somebody and help them decide, and what options are, things like that. And then how to develop those teams of, like we said, you can't do it yourself. So how do we get a group of people, hopefully, to be mobilized, to be motivated, to be whatever. And then obviously the theological piece. Now, one of the things I say is there are a lot of churches that don't necessarily even see that as a ministry of their church, but those are probably the least likely churches to invite you in to tell them it is. And
Right.
so they're different. You have to get it that different ways.
And I think, because a lot of times, and I know that this has been true of many churches that I have either been a part of or known, it's like, why would we even talk about that? We don't really have that problem here. But one of the things that we've realized is every church has that problem.
Every church has that problem. Yeah.
You might not know it,
Right.
but it's there.
Right.
And I think that's why, because, just statistically speaking, like,
Right.
look at how rampant the problem is.
Right.
Look at our population.
Right.
It's there. Like, whether you have a specific connection to it in some way.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for us to all be able to admit to each
Right.
other. Like,
Well,
it's
and
there.
even the
It's
fact that
present.
if you don't know it's there, what that means is your setting is not safe enough for people to let you know it's there.
Yeah, or you're just not even asking you're not asking
Right,
the question.
right,
like,
right.
you're not making it a point to say
Right.
this is a thing.
Right.
And not saying that means I think every church is trash, because I absolutely don't.
No,
think
no,
that.
no, no, no,
It's
no.
not that.
No.
It's that I think that it's like your focus is other places. And
Right.
we're just trying to say, can we have a percentage of your church's focus
Right.
on this too?
And I mean, if
Because
you look at us 10 years ago, we wouldn't have, this was not even on our radar.
that's what we said. It wasn't what we thought. We
Right.
thought it's a place that we can go minister in a way that's not getting ministry.
Right.
But we didn't realize specifically that was what it was that we were going to be dealing with
Right.
so intensely.
Right.
And most churches probably don't have that same level of intensity
Right.
even, but it doesn't mean
Right.
it's not there, and it's not. That's why I said we're not trying to take 100% of your church's attention. We're not trying to move it completely away and reformat the way that you structure your
Forget
church.
the Great Commission. We're just going to do some addiction treatment. Yeah, that's
Right.
not it at
That's
all.
not it at all. That's not it. It's we just think that there is room, there's capacity in all of our churches to
Right.
take on that piece, and I think that we're really excited to see that happen.
Next time on Intrinsically Motivated.
Opposite of addiction is flourishing. Well, to me, that flourishing is a relationship with Christ.
Intrinsically Motivated is an Uplift Appalachia podcast. Uplift Appalachia seeks to replace addiction and mental health challenges with flourishing, and we believe that an intrinsically motivated church is the answer. To learn more, visit upliftappalachia.org.